Hello, wonderful fifth graders. We are back to learning about fractions this week. And so we have an awesome lesson to do for the next 10, 15 minutes on things like least common denominators and how to find the simplest form of fractions. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so like I said, we are going to be doing least common denominators and simplest form today. Ooh. There we go. So today we will identify the least common denominator for a pair of fractions. We will add fractions using the least common denominator that we find, and then we will use division to find the simplest form of a fraction. All right, let's do it. So to get started, we're going to talk really quickly about the difference between factors and multiples. So we hear these words a lot in math, and a lot of the times we think that they mean the same thing, but they don't. So a factor, if we look at this anchor chart, is a number that numbers that get multiplied to get a product. Think of like all the facts for a product that you can think of, and simplified fractions is when we use them. So for instance, if we look down here, it says factors are like 1 times 15 and 3 times 5 for the number 15. So if we were to list the factors of 15, we would say 1, 3, 5, 15. Now multiples, they are a product of a given number and another whole number, which I know sounds kind of funky, but basically multiples are skip counting. And we use multiples when we're finding common denominators. So multiples are what we use for common denominators, and factors are what we use for simplifying fractions, okay? So if we were to list the multiples of 15, we would just start skip counting by 15. We wouldn't start before 15, we would start at 15 and go 15, 30, 45, 60, okay? So factors are like split apart multiplication problems that equal 15 or whatever number you're looking for, and multiples are skip counting by that number. All right. So we're going to start with least common denominators, and we're going to focus in on this problem, but you guys are going to see problems that look just like this on your practice today, okay? So we need to determine the least common denominator for the problem 2/3 plus 1/4, because these two denominators are not the same, and so I can't add them together because I can't say that 2/3 plus 1/4 equals 3/7. It just doesn't work that way, because those are different pieces, different size pieces you're trying to put together. So let's go ahead and block those out, and let's start listing our factors. Did I say it right? Are we listing factors? We are. Oh no, sorry, we're listing multiples. Even a spy gets it confused sometimes. It's okay. So we're gonna list multiples of 3 and 4. So far we have 3, 6, and 4, 8. Now remember, when we're looking for the least common denominator and we're listing the multiples, we need to have the same number in our list. So we're gonna go until we get the same number. If you think you know what it is, I want you to keep that number in your head and see if you're right. All right, let's add another number. So now we've got 3, 6, 9, and 4, 8, 12. Still no same numbers. And then if I add one more multiple to my 3's, I get 12. And those are the same. Odin agrees, if you could hear him. Oh, he really agrees. Those are the same numbers. All right. So our least common denominator is 12. And on your slides, when you're doing your practice, you're going to go down here to those little squares and you're going to drag and drop the answer into that box and you'll be done. Okay. We're going to keep going a little bit more though. So we're going to take 2/3 plus 1/4, and right now we know that the least common denominator for these two fractions is 12 because we just did that. And we know this because we listed the multiples of 3 and 4 until we found the first multiple they had in common. Are you following along? I hope so. All right. So now we need to determine what to multiply each fraction by to get a denominator of 12. This will allow us to make equivalent fractions, which is what we practiced not last week, but the week before. So 3 times 4 equals 12, and 4 times 3 equals 12. So now I know what I need to multiply both of my fractions by. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2/3 times 4 over 4. Now I want you to think in your head, what is 4 over 4 the same as? Think in your head. It's the same as 1 whole. So when I multiply a fraction by 4 over 4, I'm really just multiplying it by 1, and anything times 1 is the same, but I'm trying to get my denominator to be equivalent to, or my denominators to be equivalent to each other. So we do 4 over 4 to make them look bigger, even though they're really the same. So 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 4 is 12, and then I'm going to take 1/4, and I'm going to multiply it, I wish this would go away, by 3 over 3 for the exact same reason, to get 3/12. And now we have equivalent fractions that we can add, compare, or subtract from one another. So once you have those equivalent fractions, you can do whatever you want with them. All right. We're going to move on now to finding simplest forms when we're using sums. So what this means when it says sum is 9/12 would be the answer to an addition problem, and then we had to simplify our answer. So you're going to have a slide that looks just like this, and we're doing the first problem together, okay? So let's focus in on that first problem. We're going to simplify 9/12 because that's not the simplest form. That's not as small as we can make this fraction while keeping it the same amount. So we're going to list all the common factors for 9 and 12 to start. So remember, factors are like multiplication equations. I am getting lots of emails. I'm so sorry, guys, but it's okay. All right, so first we're listing the factors of 9 and 12. So remember, the factors, the two numbers you multiply together. So factors of 9, 1 times 9 is 9, so those are factors. 3 times 3 is 9, and we don't list 3 twice because it's the same number. And then that's the only factors for 9. All right, now I'm going to move on to 12. 1 times 12 is 12, 2 times 6 is 12, and 3 times 4 is 12. And you might notice that I put these in chronological order to help me find the one they have in common, okay? All right, so now we need to find the least common factor, which means the smallest number that both numbers, 9 and 12, have in common. So take a look at our list of factors here. Which factor do 9 and 12 have in common first? Point to it. Did you point to 3? I sure hope so. So 3, my goodness, is our least common factor. So we now know that 9 and 12 are both divisible by 3, and divisible simply means that you can divide the number evenly, okay? So now we're going to divide 9/12 by 3 over 3. Now 3 over 3 is equal to what? 1 whole. And if we divide a number by 1, we're not really changing it, but we're making this simplified. So dividing it by 1 doesn't actually change the size of the fraction. It just makes it as simple as possible. So 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. So our simplified fraction is 3/4. So pretty straightforward, right? List the factors, divide by the common factor, and get your simplified fraction. All right, so then on your slides, when you're practicing today, you are going to come down here, grab the correct answer, and drag it on up, okay? And then you're going to continue that for the rest of them. All right, so that is simplest form. Let's do it with some addition now, okay? So it's going to be really simple, really straight, or it's the exact same process. We're just doing it twice for an equation, okay? So we're going to focus in on this problem here. You guys are going to do these two on your own. All right, so first we need to find the least common denominator, which if you remember from the very beginning of this video, that's what we did first. So then we will add the fractions together and simplify, which simplifying is what we just finished doing before this slide. All right, come on. So we're going to add 1/3 plus 7/15 together. And first, we need to have common denominators to add. So we're going to list the multiples of 3 and 15 to find a common denominator. So I want you to pause now, and I want you to either say it out loud, listing the multiples, which is just skip counting, right? Or I want you to write it down, and I want you to figure out what is the first common multiple they have. All right, here we go. So remember, just as a reminder one more time, multiples are skip counting by the number given, all right? So for 3, here are our multiples: 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30. Okay, and then 15, I only listed a few: 15, 30, 45. All right, now, if you didn't list these already, I want you to look at the screen and find the first multiple they have in common. All right, did you find it? Did you find 15? That is the least common multiple, which is the denominator we are going to be looking for to make equivalent fractions here. All right, so we know now that both 3 and 15 have a multiple of 15, so that's going to be our denominator. So that means that 7/15, we don't have to do anything to it. It gets to stay the same because it already has the denominator we're looking for. We now need to make 1/3 into a new fraction, but it's really going to be the same fraction, just with a denominator of 15. All right, so let's take that on. So I need to think in my head, what am I going to multiply 3 by to get to 15? All right, on the count of 3, we're going to say it. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 5. You're going to multiply it by 5. So we know that 3 times 15 is, or 3 times 5, excuse me, is 15. So we are going to multiply 3 times 5 to get 15 in our denominator. And then what do you think I'm going to put up here? What have I done in every other problem so far? I'm going to put a 5 up here, because if I multiply the denominator by something, I have to multiply the numerator by the same number. Okay, you always multiply the top by and the bottom by the same number. So my new fraction, instead of 1/3, is 5/15. So now we're going to take you back to your slide. You're going to fill in all these blanks. So we multiplied 1/3 by 5. You didn't have to multiply 7/15, so it gets a 1 in each spot. And then you're going to write what the new fraction is. So we've got 5/15, 7/15 stayed the same. Now you have to add those two together. So 5/15 plus 7/15. Do I add my denominators together? No, my denominators stay the same, okay? So my answer is going to be 12/15, because 5 plus 7 is 12, and our denominators do not get added together. All right, so now we need to find the simplest form of 12/15. That means that we can reduce the fraction. So I would go through the exact same process we went before, and I would find the least common factor, and a factor is like those multiplication equations, and I would discover that they both have a least common factor of 3. So I would divide 12 by 3 and 15 by 3. So I want you to think in your head, what is 12 divided by 3? That's 4. Okay, so now I know my numerator is going to be 4. And what is 15 divided by 3? 15 divided by 3 is 5. So I'm going to have 4 in my numerator and 5 in my denominator, which gives me 4/5 as my simplest form. Alrighty, 5th graders. So that is all we have for the lesson. I just have one little reminder for you to make sure that you are as well directed as possible during your practice today and tomorrow. So you are going to have slides that look just like this. I already told you. At the bottom of each slide are directions. Look at all that. Look at this right here. There's a ton of directions. be sure to read those. They tell you how to solve the slide because some of them aren't very straightforward for solving. So you need to make sure you read the directions so that you know how to do your work. All right. Well, fifth graders, we learned how to find the least common denominator by listing factors. We learned how to simplify fractions by finding the least common multiple. And then we learned how to add those fractions together and simplify them at the end. So I can't wait to see what you guys do with your practice today and tomorrow on these skills. Go forth and conquer.